Welcome to Biz Banter, where we cover all the buzz and biz. I'm your host, Sage. Let's get into it. Imagine constructing roads for a living. What do you think the career trajectory would be? Maybe you'll start by building bridges and tunnels and eventually go on to be a project manager or a functional manager of operation. But what if I told you that the career path would look a little bit different if you're a civil engineer? What if I told you that you would go from constructing roads to constructing dresses? Yeah, dresses. Would you believe it? Our guest on this episode has a journey that has literally taken her from constructing roads to constructing dresses, and this is a journey that is nothing short of book-worthy. Amber Renae is an Australian entrepreneur and e-learning expert, and now the star of the hottest new reality show on the FYI network called Dream Life Los Angeles. In the show, we get to see how Amber takes on Hollywood while creating her revolutionary online business, the Love Academy. But how did Amber start her career as a civil engineer and go on to become a serial entrepreneur and reality TV star? We're going to hear all about it from Amber herself. Let's get into it. Hi, Amber. Welcome to the show.
Super excited to be here. Thank you so much for letting me connect with you and your audience.
I'm so excited to talk to you today. There's a lot to talk about, your entrepreneurial journey. You have a new show on the FYI network, so excited to talk about it all. Before we learn more about you and your journey as an entrepreneur, we're actually going to start out with a little bit of a game. So we're going to do a little true or false. I have a few assumptions about entrepreneurs, and I want you to tell me whether you agree or disagree. So if you agree, you'll say true. If you disagree, false.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So the first assumption is that entrepreneurs are born, not made.
Ooh, I actually feel like I'm a born entrepreneur, so I'm going to go with true. I was selling clothes when I was like year 6 at school. That was my first entrepreneurial game. So I'm going to go true.
What did you do when you were in 6th grade?
Made clothes for my friends and sold them to my girlfriends. Yeah.
Awesome. Definitely got that hustle in you. So next assumption is that entrepreneurs are only motivated by money.
Oh, absolutely false. I feel like entrepreneurs are not motivated by money. If I was motivated by money, I would be in a day job earning a salary right now.
So what else are you motivated by? What keeps you driven and why do you choose to do what you do?
I feel like for me, it's all in this business. It's all about creating an impact. In my first 2 businesses, it was all about exploring creativity. My first 2 businesses were a big exploration around what I can create, what I can put out in the world, what I can manifest. But this one is more about what kind of change I'm going to create.
Awesome. So that's definitely not about money for you. So the final assumption we have is that entrepreneurs do not have a personal life.
Ooh, I'm going to say sometimes true, sometimes false. And I guess it depends on how long you've been in business for. My first 2 businesses, I was just all about the hustle, but I also loved it. And then this business, I did 2 years of a lot of personal life, but now I'm probably 4 hours a day at this point of work. And then the rest is all, me time.
That's so awesome. That sounds like a dream life. And we're going to learn a little bit more about that. So tell us about your career path leading up to starting your own business. So what did you do before you started any venture?
Before my very first business, I was a civil engineer. So I used to work on a construction site building roads and bridges. I studied a 4-year degree. In my second year of university, I got the very first job out of all of the 400 other men in my class. I got the first job. And that was working on a construction site for one of the biggest infrastructure companies here in Australia. So I started working on the site on the weekends and on my holidays. And then when I graduated, I worked full time. So I did about 6 or 7 months full time on a construction site. I built roads, I built an on-ramp, I built rock retaining walls, I did a bit of concrete pavement, and then decided that, it just wasn't my game. Like I was never going to be successful in that industry. I was a little fashionable kind of girl. I wasn't a big, gruff, angry old man, so, it was never going to be something that I was going to be naturally gifted at. So that was the end of that first business. That was my first job that I quit. All of my jobs since then I got fired from, but that was the first job that I quit.
So what drew you to that in the first place? Civil engineer is pretty interesting, and especially it's a male dominated profession. So what specifically made you want to be a civil engineer?
My dad is an engineer and my older brother is an engineer, and I'm naturally gifted at maths and physics and science. It's something that I can, back at school I used to go to maths camps when everyone else was like going on holidays, like little nerdy Amber is going and crunching numbers for another week. So I'm that kind of cool. So that, yeah, it was just sort of like, well, I'll just go and do it, right? I can, so why not?
Fantastic. And so you eventually realized that engineering wasn't for you, and then you decided to transition, and your transition was to owning your own fashion label. And this fashion label started out with humble beginnings, but you ended up dressing celebrities like Paris Hilton. So walk us through your journey with your fashion label.
So that started with me on a sewing machine. I made 4 shirts the first week, took them to the cool boutique where I live. They bought 4 shirts. The next week I made 8 shirts. They bought 8 shirts. 5 years later, I had 120 accounts around the world. We exported to Paris, Tokyo, LA, and South Africa. I did runway shows all around the globe and dressed some of the biggest celebs of the day, which back in the day was Paris Hilton. And this was before the internet. So it wasn't like, you could just DM Paris and see if she wanted to wear your collection. My entire business was run, I used to try and get accounts by picking up the landline, cold calling a boutique and posting them out a catalog and seeing if they wanted to buy my collection from a catalog. And that was how I ran my very first business, which, got me really good at sales because I was literally getting cold rejected on the phone every single day, like every day, like, hey, do you want to buy my collection? No, I don't, junior designer. So, that business was great. And also the other beautiful thing about that business is that I needed a way to figure out how to get my collection known. So I just knew that I needed to get into all the local papers and get onto the local news and get in the local radio station. So, and this was in a little town. So I just literally called the journalist and said, hey, I'm a little designer in this little town. Like, can you publish my clothes in your next newspaper and things like that. So that was really my first foray into publishing and media and publicity, which is something I'm obviously really good at and really passionate about and teach these days. But back then I was just like, I need to get my stuff out there. So how am I going to do this? Like there was no, I'm going to post it on social media. It didn't exist. So that was how I used to run that business.
That's so fantastic. In today's day and age, it definitely is easier to spread the word about your business and everything. So do you feel like for yourself, how big of social media, how much is that a part of your businesses now today?
I mean, well, for me, we do a lot of publicity. We do a lot of advertising. So running a business, there are 3 ways to build a business and to grow customers. One is paid advertising, which we do really well. One is publicity. We also do really well. And the third is content marketing, which basically is putting content out on your social media. So for me, content marketing is the slow, time consuming way, because I'm really good at the other ways. So for me personally, I don't do a lot of content marketing, but if I was just starting out in business, that would be my angle. I'd be all about, getting really strategic about how I was going to create content that converted. Where I see a lot of business owners going wrong is that they create content for content's sake. Oh, it's Tuesday, I need to put out a post, or it's Thursday, I need to do a post today, but they haven't given any thought as to what they're going to write in that post in order for people to understand that they had the solution to that person's problem. And I see that's where most people going wrong with their social media.
And do you think that social media can potentially be the only way you market and that you can spend no money and actually be successful in marketing your business?
I see a lot of people solely relying on content marketing and social media for sure. Absolutely. And the key there is to, sure, you don't have to boost your posts or understand advertising, but the key is to get really strategic with one particular platform. So if you decide that you're going to, especially if you're in fashion, you're going to go on the gram. So then you study the gram. So do courses, understand how the analytics works, understand how the algorithm works, like read blogs about it and become a master of that one particular type of platform. And it really doesn't even matter which platform. If you decide that you're really great at video content, go and figure out how to hack YouTube and create a YouTube channel and be consistent with putting content out on there. So I think that would be my best advice for people who are trying to break into a content game.
That's fantastic. And consistency is definitely key. So you also went from starting your fashion label, and that led you to an opportunity to be on Project Runway. So tell us all about your experience on Project Runway.
Project Runway was awesome, but I'm actually going to share that how that first fashion label ended, because it's pretty pivotal compared to what people are going through right now. So that business was, we were thriving. We were doubling collection after collection, doubling in size. And the way that the business model works, which is why I advise people not to run this business model anymore, is that you pay for everything upfront. So you prepay for your fabrics, your patterns, your collections, you pay for your manufacturer, and then you hope that they're going to deliver that collection. Once they deliver it, then you go back and you give it to the stores that promised that they were going to pay you. So you're out of pocket right up front. So we did this in one particular collection. We paid for everything. We bought it, about $70,000 worth of stock, paid for our manufacturer. The manufacturer went out of business and kept all of my fabrics, all of my stock, everything. That forced me to go out of business. I went bankrupt. And by that point, I had realized that I had worked myself to death. You talked about, do people entrepreneurs have a social life? At that point, no. I was working minimum 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I did not take a single day off. I ended up working myself to death. So I had cancer, I had a nervous breakdown, I was hospitalized, I had stomach ulcers, I was on all sorts of anti-anxiety, antidepressant pills, and I was just a shell of a human being. Like, I was sick. I wasn't good. So that was how that first business ended, which I think everyone glorifies this entrepreneurial journey about how it's all like 4 hours a day, that's all you work. No, this was how I got to that was one of the instances of my entrepreneurial journey.
Fantastic. And that's very, very, that's a lot going on. So how did you handle having not only losing everything, but you're also dealing with all your illnesses? You had cancer. That's a really big, tough thing to be dealing with. So how did you overcome that and also have, be mentally strong at that point? Because having hit after hit, that can be very difficult. So how did you handle that?
So I think at the time, I was just day by day at the time. So, and I guess like all of it happening at once, it was like, I can't do anything but surrender. So I guess if it was like just my business ending, I would have, figured out how to deal with that. Or I probably would have restarted it again, knowing me, like there was no part of me that was ever going to give up that fashion label. That was all I wanted to do ever since I was a kid. Like I told you at the start, I was selling clothes in high school. That was my dream. So, I would never have given that label up. And I guess it was because I was hospitalized that I had no choice. So, there was no easy way out of it. It caused about a 12-month depression. Like I was, not coping for about a full 12 months of my life, trying to figure out what my next step was, realizing that, that dream of my childhood dream was over. So there was a lot of psychological trauma that went around with that. And then in addition, which is something that is extremely dangerous for anyone that's starting a business, I saw that business as a part of me. That was my identity. That was a child. So when I lost that, I had to grieve that as though I was losing a child, which is a really dangerous place to be in when you're so close and so connected to your business, because that's how you're looking at it. And that's definitely something that I did really wrong in the first business. I looked at it as though it was a piece of me. So losing that was like a huge identity shift, and having to break down that whole ego of like, I'm Amber the fashion designer. So if I'm not Amber the fashion designer, who am I now? So yeah, it was a lot on every level: physical, emotional, mental. Like there was a lot to go through.
Do you think as a business owner that you should be detached from your business? So it shouldn't necessarily be a part of your identity?
100%. And also, don't place too much importance on it. It's just something that you're doing every day. I see a lot of, and I'm super guilty of this. It's like, that's all I am. I'm that person. Who would I be without that? And businesses fail all the time. So, be gentle with your expectations of what you think that business is, and also what you think that business has to deliver to you. This is what a lot of where I see a lot of creatives going wrong, is that they think that their business has to do everything. It has to pay their bills, and it has to be able to buy them a nice car and buy them a house and pay for their holiday and give them time off. And, businesses don't always do those things. Maybe your business is just something that you're doing on the side because it's fun and it's a hobby, maybe it should just be a side hustle. Maybe it should just be a hobby. Maybe it should just be something fun that you do after your day job. Rather than putting the pressure on it to pay your bills and for it to be this big grand thing that we see all the entrepreneurs on Instagram making it into.
Yeah. And so do you think that your experience going from that label and going through all those hardships to getting onto Project Runway, do you think you would have done it had you not had that experience before of losing everything?
I think there's a lot of things in my life that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't have lost that. Like, and you're going to hear a couple of other times where I've been through a similar sort of experience. But I just think now that I have reflection and now that I have hindsight, I feel like the universe pushed me at every step. So I would never have chosen to leave that business. And if I was still in that business now, I would hate it. I would absolutely hate it. But I still wouldn't have the courage to leave it because that was my dream and that was my child and that was my identity. So I would never have left it. But I feel like the universe has lovingly pushed me out of all of the things that it has.
Sometimes it gives you what you need rather than what you want. So
Yeah.
that's really great that you had that experience. So tell us about what it was like designing on Project Runway.
Project Runway was super fun. Are you a fan?
I have seen a little bit of it. I haven't seen any episode you're on. You are on Project Runway Australia, right?
Yeah,
Gonna have
yeah.
to check that out now.
Sure. So, it was super fun. So, like I always say, it was the best of times and the worst of times. Whenever you see these reality TV contestants crying, I'm always like, yeah, there's a reason why they cry. So that environment is a unbelievable pressure cooker. The producers make it to be even more strenuous and even more mentally debilitating than you can imagine. So we were, the reality was we were working 4 hours. We were sleeping 4 hours a day. Our show was sponsored by Toblerone. So your wake up call was 4 a.m. You'd wake up at 4 a.m. You're delirious. So you're eating Toblerone for breakfast at 4 a.m. You're trying to go and make clothes all day on a sewing machine. Like, in a sweatshop, they used to make it super hot. So you'd be like constantly sweaty all day. I remember at one point I was just like sculling water and I had like 20 water bottles underneath my sewing desk because it was just so hot. And then to create drama, the producers would make you go and bitch about your friend's dress. So like in week one, they'd be like, "Hey Amber, I need to go to your bestie and tell your bestie that his dress sucks." And in week one, I was all like, "Oh my God, no, I would never say that to him. Like, I love him and he's amazing." And then they were like, "Cool, well, we're just going to make your life hell until you go and do it." So then they would bring over like 3 or 4 cameramen and they'd all just stand there and heckle you until you were like, okay, I'll go and say it. And so that's how it all started. And so by the end, you're delirious and they'd come over and be like, "Hey Amber, I need you to go and tell your best friend that his dress sucks." And you're like, "Yeah, cool, no worries." You run over, you'd be like, "Oh my God, that's the worst dress ever." And then you'd run back and like get back onto the sewing machine. And so that's the reality of these TV shows. They're designed to create drama and they do a really good job of it. But it was a great experience for me. Like off the back of that, I launched a national media career. So I became like the go-to person in fashion. So whenever anyone was looking for someone to comment on fashion or to, appear on the morning shows talking about fashion or, any of those sort of fashion related segments, I was the girl, which was awesome. So that was another foray into publicity and understanding the media for me. And then also, I was able to land the job as the fashion presenter for Fashion TV. So Fashion TV is like the global television show where they just air run like fashion catwalks. I don't know if you watch it, but like again, manifesting. So as a girl, when I had my fashion label for 6 years as when I was a fashion designer, that Fashion TV was on every single day, all day, every day for 6 years. And I used to watch it every day, just going, "Oh my God, I would love to be on that show." And then I got the gig as the only Australian presenter. So my whole job was to travel Australia and interview everyone who's anyone in the world of fashion and celebs. And that's what I did for like 3 years. So that then kind of led me into my next business, which was a fashion styling business. So it was all good fun.
That's amazing. So you mentioned manifestation. So how big are you on manifesting and doing affirmations? How much of that is a part of your life?
These days, it's probably like 90%. So these days, that's my sole focus. And I use all of the things. So, I'm sure we've all heard of like visualization and writing it down and, a repetition in your mindset and like every tool that I can come across that's ever worked for me, I use all of them all the time. And then I also like because I think we've all watched The Secret and we all know like what you visualize and what you put out to the universe, you get back. But I think the missing ingredient with The Secret, which is what they came out with the power, is that you need to get into the vibration, like the feeling of what it would feel like when you had that thing into your life. So, these days, if I'm trying to manifest something, I do all the, the things of writing down and everything. But then I think, well, how is that going to feel when I have that thing in my life? And then I really try and sit into the emotion and the feeling of that as often as possible. And that's the supercharger when it comes to manifestation.
That's fantastic. And, there's so many different ways to go about it, whether it's journaling and writing down what you want and just having gratitude and really envisioning it. So that's really fantastic that you do it. And it's great to see somebody that is actually manifested and it's worked for them. So it definitely does work for anyone that's listening. Give it a shot for sure. So after you had done your TV reporting, you mentioned that you got into styling. So walk us through your styling career.
So styling, I knew that because there are no jobs in Australia for fashion design, and I knew that I couldn't start another label. So I just literally changed my email signature from Amber Fashion Designer to Amber Fashion Stylist, and I figured the rest out from there. So I had no network, I had no contacts. I'd moved to a new city, I had no clue, and I just I just hustled. I was just like, okay, I need to figure out how to do this thing. The first year, I think I did about 100 photo shoots for free, just getting connected, building my folio, meeting publicists, meeting designers, meeting models, getting photographers, and really just figuring out the whole industry. And that really paid off for me. So then about 3 years after running that business, I was offered two of the biggest contracts in the country. So I got offered the fashion editor role at Women's Health and Fitness. It's our national glossy publication, and the resident stylist at the time, our biggest radio and TV network. So I was doing these two contract gigs, super, super cushy, loved it. I was working with a bunch of celebrities, dressing them for events like the Cannes Film Festival. I was working with personal clients and just like, and at the time, also doing the fashion reporter's job for fashion TV. So I was literally like queen of fashion, like living my best #fashion life, just like loving it.
So how did you balance doing both styling and reporting at the same time? I'm sure that was a lot on your plate.
It was a lot, but a lot of it, the reporting you kind of do like in the evenings, like it wasn't like a full-time kind of thing. But yeah, I think I've always been highly productive, and I think I've always worked really hard. Like I've always had that work ethic of like, do more, fit more in. I'm happy to work on the weekends, which I guess is coming back to that whole like entrepreneurial hustle thing, which is not what I subscribe to these days. But I have always worked really hard.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that you had done hundreds of shoots that were free of charge when you first got into styling. So how did you sustain yourself during that time period where you're doing a lot of free work and trying to build up to getting clientele?
So this is a piece of advice that I give to anyone in their first year or two of business. I had a day job that paid my bills. So I was telemarketing, which back then I just used to work for I had two photography studios that I used to work for. And I used to go in there for 8 hours a day and set appointments on the phone. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fun. It paid pretty okay. And I would do that like 3 days a week. And on the other 3 days, I would build my folio and build my fashion business. So I got a job that I was capable of doing. It didn't drain me. I didn't have to put in any effort. I could rock up 1 minute before, leave a minute after I was clocked off, and I could then go and focus on building my passion. And that's probably the best advice I can give to anyone who's thinking of starting a business. Don't expect that it's going to pay your bills now or ever. Expect that, think about getting a side hustle that doesn't drain you, that you can do whenever you have time to slot in around building your own business. So if you work best in the mornings, then build your business in the mornings and go and get like a nanny or a babysitting job at night or whatever it is.
Fantastic. And how do you feel like so there's a lot of people that sometimes say when it comes to entrepreneurship, of course, there's so many different ways and no one entrepreneur's journey is the same, but a lot of people do believe that, if you want to do it, take that leap of faith, quit your job, just go for it. So do you believe in that, or do you think you can be strategic? So maybe keep the job while you're trying to do something. What do you think is a good approach?
So my first two businesses, I was the all-in girl. And in fact, this business as well, I was the all-in girl. So, I was more like the telemarketing thing literally just paid my rent. So if I wanted to eat that week, I had to, figure out some other kind of hustle. And that was the approach that I've always sort of like, spoken about. I'm like, yeah, no, you go burn all bridges, go in hard. But it provides so much extra stress and hardship, and, it puts so much pressure on that business to make it pay your bills. And it's just, as someone who's seen a lot of businesses fail at this point, it just has a layer of pressure that no one should put on themselves. And it takes all the fun out of it as well. So like building a business should be fun, you know, like doing the reason that you started your business is because you're wildly passionate about that thing. And so you think that you're going to turn it into a business. So the minute that it starts being unfun, usually is the minute that you need it to pay your bills. So, you know, take that away. I still think today, I feel like I may maybe be happier if I didn't turn my fashion label into a label, if it was just something that I still did for fun. Because the reason that I started that is because I made every single dress that I ever wore. I made it, every single thing that I ever wore in my entire life, I made myself, and I loved it. And everywhere I went, everyone was like, can I get you dressed? Can I buy your top? Like, where can I get that? And these days I've lost all of that passion for that. The thought of like making a dress, I'm like, oh, I could never do that now. But you know, that was such a passion for me, but running the label ruined it for me.
That's really insightful, and that's very interesting to see. So sometimes it really just depends on your goals for sure, that whether or not you want to keep something as a hobby and something that you're passionate about, or whether you want to explore it. So I really like that you mentioned that. So after you did styling, you started an e-learning portal. So tell us more about your e-learning portal that you started.
Definitely, I definitely want to get into that, but I do just want to share the story of how my styling business ended, because
Yes.
again, I feel like it's what a lot of people are going through right now with the current global climate. So as you heard, I had literally all of the best fashion contracts in the country. Like no one, you know, most people would work 20 years as a stylist and not get one of those jobs. I had two contracts, two really good contracts. And I had that fashion TV reporter's job. Again, I was the only fashion reporter in the country. It wasn't like there was a bunch of these jobs. I was it. I had the one. So, you know, literally living my best fashion life, could not get any better. This was the dream, you know, best fashion, you know, can't get any better. Then the effects of the global financial crisis finally hit Australia, and all monies for things like fashion styling and TV presenting dried up. I was unemployed and unemployable, could not get work. Tried to go back to the construction site, tried to get a job on the as an engineer. They didn't even want to take me. I literally could not get any work. All that I had left was this knowledge. I kind of knew, and again, I had a huge grieving process around that, because I knew the fashion game was over, because that was it. You know, like I couldn't go back and get another fashion editor's job. They didn't exist. I can't go and get another TV presenter's job. They didn't exist. Like that whole fashion dream had ended for me. And again, there was so much psychological trauma around that, because again, fashion was all I dreamed of since I was 2 years old. And now I was in my 30s and realizing that my fashion dream was ending. Like that's a brutal existence to come face to face with, because then it's like, hang on, what do I do now? Like I'm kind of too old to reinvent myself again. And I have no other passion in life. I've not only ever been passionate about fashion. So what am I going to do? So yeah, it was a tough time.
So how do you think, we had discussed attachment a little bit earlier, do you think you can ever look at a business or a career as something that is permanent or something that you can last throughout your life? Or do you think it's more important to have a much more flexible mindset and know that, you know what, things might change? What are your views on that?
These days, after being through two business losses, and again, the second business loss was a huge identity. So I was you know, I was a fashion TV presenter. Like I had so much ego and identity around that, and I was a celebrity stylist. You know, like you can imagine the ego that I had around that identity. So when that all came crashing down, it was a hugely mentally debilitating time. And again, I spent, you know, I remember I had 2 full weeks in bed where my brothers came around each day just to check that I hadn't done anything stupid the day before, and that I was still there, still alive, still kicking. And like that's how bad it was. So so when so as a result, again, upon reflection, not at the time, but upon reflection, and certainly in this business, I'm now completely hands off when it comes to what's going to happen next. Like I totally surrender to the universe. I totally believe that we're being guided by a force, even if it's like maybe it's my subconscious doing this, but I'm just not aware enough that it's that you know, it's ending these businesses at the time that they need to end. I don't know, but I fully surrendered to the fact that maybe I don't know what's right for me. Maybe maybe there's a higher power that's leading me into something that's certainly better for me in this, you know, for the future, Amber. Because again, looking at what I'm doing now compared to what I was doing then, if I was still working as a fashion stylist, I would hate it. I would hate it. If I was still TV presenting, I would hate it. It's not, it's not really aligned with my values as the kind of person that I am these days. But back then, I would never have quit any of those jobs ever.
So do you think, now that you're taking an approach to surrender to the universe, do you think you can have a 5-year, 10-year plan? Just because, you've had experiences where things have gone out of your control. So how much do you think you should plan for the future?
For me at this point, I realize I'm on like a 5 to 6 year cycle. So everything kind of lasts about 5 to 6 years. I'm coming up to my 5th year in this business, and I can already feel a shift. Like at the start of this year, I was like, I feel like something's going to happen here. Like I can kind of feel a new iteration of Amber coming. So I'm just kind of, at this point, I'm just hands offing the whole thing. I'm just like, cool, whatever you think. Like you've done really well for me so far. So whatever you think is going to happen next, I'm all up for the ride.
That's awesome. And that's really a good approach too, just because when you're going with the flow, that's also exciting in a way because you never know what's next. So that's awesome that you're doing that. So back to your e-learning portal. Tell us more about it. Tell us why you started it after all of these experiences. What led you to that?
So I had nothing, as you heard. I was a, debilitated, depressed mess. I had nothing. All that I knew was how to build fashion styling businesses. I was really good at the business side of the game. No one was helping. Like there was no such thing as helping in that industry. No one mentors, or you can't get advice. There's no such, you can't go and do a course. Didn't exist. And my brother was just like, you should create an e-course. This was in 2015. Those things didn't exist back then. So I sat down one day, got my phone out, shot everything that I knew about becoming a fashion stylist. And that was the beginning of this business. So I didn't know I was going to turn into this. I didn't know I was going to be like a digital nomad and working from a laptop. That again was never a dream of mine. And I certainly didn't know that my purpose in life would be to educate and to empower and to inspire people. Again, I wasn't sitting around going, oh, I want to help millions of people around the world. No, I wasn't thinking about that. I was like, I want to be on television, like it was never it's something that I sat around and consciously thought about. But now that I'm in this business, it's so much more aligned with my purpose, with my values, and also much more aligned with the unique skill set that I've been given in this lifetime. Like my last two businesses, I never got to use my engineering degree. Like they were highly creative, which was a beautiful experience, but they weren't very analytical. I didn't really need to think too hard. As a fashion stylist, you can not a lot of brain cells required. But in this business, it's super tricky. Like I run data, I basically crunch numbers, read data, run ads, read analytics, study algorithms. That's my job. As well as the creative, the inspirational, the teaching, the educational side. And all of those things are much more aligned with the whole self. And again, I would never have chosen this.
So why were you compelled to build this? Was this more out of necessity that you built this, or was there anything else that really drove you towards building an e-learning portal?
So I think this sort of comes down to like following your purpose, right? Because I think people, it's a question I get asked all the time. I don't know what my purpose is. I'm trying to figure out what my purpose is. And I think people are waiting for a big flashing light that says, this is your purpose. This is it over here. Look this way. But that's not how it is. And certainly it's not how it's been for really any of my businesses. Each of them just started with me being passionate enough about doing that thing that I was interested in learning about it. I was interested in studying it. I was interested in doing it for free. So my first course, I used to sell for $9. That course today sells for $700. Same course, same stuff. But back then I was just like, take it, stylist, take it. You guys need it. Like have it, like it's yours, I didn't know that it was going to turn into this mega global brand. And also I was very passionate about it. It was something that was new. It was interesting. It required me to think. I was passionate enough to read blogs and to listen to podcasts about it and to read, study it, find people that were doing it and studying it. And that's what I did in my first year of this. I was passionate enough about it that I studied 18 e-courses on how to run an e-course business in my first year. And again, I wasn't making money back then. I was just doing it because I was like, I'm interested enough in doing this that I want to learn about it.
That's so incredible. So from $9 to $700 for that course. And that was your first course. It's about how to run a profitable styling business. And now you offer a number of different courses and they're all so unique. So how did you go from idea to execution? So, you got this idea that I'm going to start an e-learning portal. You studied about it. How did you push yourself, or how did you really get the ball rolling?
So again, it just comes down to, I was willing enough to work for free and I wasn't making it pay my bills. So I think at the time I had a crappy bar job and I was just, doing whatever I could find to make money to enough to survive. And then this business I was just doing because I was passionate about it. So, I got onto webinars pretty quickly. In my first year, I started doing webinars, and then I would do 2 webinars every single week for about 6 months. So every week on a Thursday, I'd wake up, I'd do a webinar at 9 a.m. for my Australians and then for my Americans, and then I'd do a webinar at 9 p.m. for my Australians. And I did that every single week for about 6 months. And so I see people that are starting this business these days, and I teach, one of my courses is how to do this business. And I see people going, oh, well, I tried to do a webinar and it didn't work. And so now I'm going to quit. And I'm like, dude, I did like 100 webinars in my first year before I realized, before I made any real kind of money. I mean, to be fair, I did end up monetizing this business quite quickly. So in that first year, I made 100 grand, which was pretty cool. But the reason that I made that money is because I studied people that had already done it. So like I studied masters who taught, who were teaching the things that I needed to learn. And I just took their e-courses and I implemented their e-courses rather than trying to blood, sweat, and tears it, which is what I've done for all of my other businesses. I've always tried to figure it out myself. And I'm going to, I'll be able to figure it out. I'm a smart girl. Whereas this business, I was like, no, I'm just going to buy a course and they can tell me.
So, you know, there are times where maybe pulling the plug, maybe quitting is a good option, right? So there are some individuals you really saw it through and then it ended up working out for you, but some people did quit earlier on. So when do you, or how do you know when you should leave a business and this is just not working out?
Well, I think when you've lost your passion for it. So I see a lot of people creating e-courses and then wanting to quit because, oh, I've tried to sell it once and I didn't sell it. Well, are you still passionate about that topic? Do you still have a dream of helping people with that topic? Do you still think that there are people that need what you're teaching in that e-course? If there is, then you have a right and you have a service to have another go at selling it. And I think, people quit when they get into their own fear and their own, limiting beliefs around oh, I don't want to sell, or I don't want to put myself out there and all those kind of things, which is scary, sure. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship is the biggest personal development journey that anyone can go on. So, when you're faced with these fears on this journey, you're going to have to work through your shit. That's just part of the journey.
So now let's talk about your new online business. So that's the Love Academy. So what's your transition from your e-learning portal to the Love Academy? How did that happen?
So the Love Academy is an e-learning portal as well. It teaches love and dating and relationships in the modern world. So that all came about because a colleague of mine, Serena, was having this television show. She'd managed to figure out from Australia how to get herself onto a reality TV show in America. It's her show. She owns it. She produced it. She bought it. She's she owns it. And then on the show, she basically, was like, well, we're going to tell the whole story of how we're setting up this Love Academy. And that's how the TV show ends up documenting the setting up, the creation of this academy. And so it follows the lives of myself and Serena as we set up this business in LA, and also follows the life of, personally, my storyline is how I'm, trying to date in LA, trying to find a husband. And we see that all unfold on the show as well.
So that's incredible. And the show is really cool. There's a lot of Hollywood elite on there. So there's Caitlyn Jenner, Corey Feldman, all those individuals as well. So why were you really compelled to build the Love Academy? You already had a successful e-learning portal. You didn't have to do something else, but why? Why do it?
I feel like that's what the world needs most right now, love and connection and improved relationships. I'm seeing so many relationships failing at the moment. So I was super passionate about bringing that kind of knowledge to the people.
And how do you think as an entrepreneur, how do you balance love and relationships? Because you're so busy as it is when you're trying to start your own hustle. How do you think you can really manage the two? Is it doable? Is it even doable?
I feel like I'm the wrong person to ask that because I've not been able to manage the two. At the moment, my priority is love. So what I've found is that because I'm focusing on love, my business is taking a back seat. I don't know if that's good advice. I don't know if you should be listening to that advice, but certainly for me personally, I'm 100% girl. So I have to be 100% on something that I'm doing. And I know that at the moment, I'm like, business is like 3-4 hours a day. And then the rest of the day, I'm like, cool, let's get on the dating apps. Let's connect. Like, let's have conversations, that kind of thing.
Do you think dating in today's day and age is more difficult because we're more connected through apps and we have all these online options, but there's also like a level of instant gratification with that, which I think could make things difficult. So do you think it's easier now, or do you think it would have been better if we didn't have all this online availability to us?
I mean, personally, and again, I'm certainly not the love master. I'm the last person you should be listening to when it comes to love and dating advice. But I mean, I think dating in 2020 is brutal. Honestly, I think it's a really tough thing to do. I think, yeah, there's a lot of, instant gratification, a lot of options, and also just a lot of, shitty behavior from people. And then also a lot of like, I like to try and meet someone and try and have a connection with someone one on, in a personalized environment before we try and cyber stalk them and see how many followers they have and see what they're talking about on social media. And it's almost impossible to do that. I've tried to remain pretty anonymous on my dating profiles, and almost every single guy, if we meet up for a date, they're like, oh, so I found you online. It's like, how did you find me? You don't know my surname. Like, how do what did you do to find me? And then by then they've already got so many preconceived ideas around the kind of person that you are. And it makes it, for me, I'm just like, hey, like, let's just get to know each other first before we start judging each other by the filter that we use.
Yeah, and that is indeed brutal. So I think there's definitely a space for something like the Love Academy. So what were some unexpected hurdles that you faced while building the Love Academy?
So this was my second partnership that I've worked in. I have a partnership with another good friend. So it was a similar partnership. It's my online expertise and her actual content. So we partnered in that way. And that partnership is great. Super easy, super 50-50. She doesn't step into my world. I don't step into her world. She does the content. I do the marketing and the digital and all that kind of stuff. So I've had a bit of experience in working in partnerships. This partnership did not go like that. So Serena is also, has very strong opinions about what it should, all of the stuff that I work on. So, wants to have opinions about the funnels, wants to have opinions about how the platform should look, wants to have opinions about how it should all, how it should all be put together. And it was just extremely difficult working with someone like that, because it's like, you're partnering with me because I'm the digital expert. I'm the e-learning expert. I know how to build e-courses. That's my thing. You create the content. I'm not going to tell you how to create a course about love because I don't know about that. You're the love expert. You create the content. So that in that realm, it was an extremely difficult partnership.
So how do you think, going about finding a business partner, a co-founder for a new business, what do you think you need to pay attention to in somebody that you're looking to partner with? What qualities should they have?
So firstly, it should be a skill set that you don't have. So with my corporate business partner, I do not have any of her skill set, and even the skill set that she has. So she sells the course in traditional ways. So she gets on the phone, she goes and does business meetings, the traditional selling methods, and I sell the course through funnels and ads. So, I cannot do what she does. She cannot do what I do. So I think that's step number one, is making sure that you have a skill set that is completely different to you, that is complementary to you. And then step number two, making sure that you're partnering with someone who you respect and who respects you. So who is capable of respecting you. Because if you don't have that trust and respect, the relationship's going to crumble really quickly.
How important is it to be flexible in a partnership? So maybe if visions change, so maybe you both were on the same page one day, but then someone starts seeing a different vision for it. How much give or take should you do?
I think, and I think a lot, to be honest. I think it should be a very flexible, moving, rolling kind of parts, as entrepreneurship is. Like, I didn't set out to create the business that I have now. It just kind of turned and rolled and morphed into what it is. So I think you should be really flexible with that, and also just making sure that you're looking at it through a lens of, is that the right thing for the business, rather than like, oh, you're hurting my feelings because you're not doing the thing that I wanted you to do. and not being affronted because of, you know, any kind of personal relationship, and just looking at it through the lens of, yeah, that's a smart business move. Not what I would have chosen, but a smart business move. So let's do that.
Fantastic. And that's really, really good advice. So what's the best piece of advice that you have received?
I think the best piece of advice is practice resilience and practice failure. Get really good at failure. So as we've heard already, my entrepreneurial journey is riddled with failure. The only reason I'm here is that I failed more times than anyone else. Most people at the end of the fashion label would have been like, cool, I'm going to get a day job. That's the end of my life. That's the end of my dreams. I'm going to be in a day job for the next 20, 30 years. And then anyone that stuck it up for the second business, when that business failed, again, most people would have been like, cool, I'm going to go back to the construction side. I gave it a good red hot go. You know, I did 10 years. Cool. You know, that's me done. I'm going to settle down, get a nice job, buy a house, you know, like all the things. So, but I think, like, you know, the reason that I'm so successful now is that I failed more times than all of my competitors.
And when it comes to failure, and also you had discussed rejection. So early on within your first business, a lot of cold calling, cold emailing, getting rejected. How do you deal with that? Does it ever get easier being rejected so much or failing? Does it ever become easier?
Oh, for sure. It's a muscle. So all of these things are a muscle. So it's not that I don't fail these days and I don't get rejected. I get rejected every other day of the week. It's now that I've trained my mind to not make that into something that it's not. So back in the day when I got rejected for selling my business, when that person said, no, thank you, I don't want to buy your collection, that then turned into, you suck, you're a terrible designer, you're never going to be good at anything. And I'm pointing to my head here. So these are the stories that I'm telling myself in my head. The program became, you know, you're a terrible designer, you're going to be a failure for the rest of your life, no one's going to buy anything. And it turned into this whole story that I started telling myself. So I just have worked on training my brain to not tell myself those stories. So these days, if I call someone and they say, no, thank you, I don't want to buy your course or whatever it is, I hang up the phone and I go, cool, that's not any reflection on me. That has nothing to do with the course that I've created. It has no indication of past success, future success, current success. And it's certainly not a reflection of who I am as a person. It's just that that person doesn't want to buy my stuff at that point in time. And so it's really just a matter of training your brain to positive self-talk.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, because oftentimes I think we start taking rejection or failure as something personal when oftentimes it actually doesn't have anything to do with us in the first place. So that's a really great point that you brought up, and it definitely is a muscle that should be exercised. So I really like that. So what was a really big moment for your business so far? So from any of your businesses or your career, let's just go with your career. Have you had a this was all worth it moment? Something that's like, everything I've gone through, it's been worth it. What was that moment for you?
Strangely enough, I get one of those moments almost every single day in this business. So this business, there are two things that give me that moment. One is whenever I make an online sale, I get a notification, like an email and a ping on my phone. To this day, I still get excited when I get those pings. And like, I don't have any notifications. Like, I've turned off all notifications, but I leave those notifications on. And to this day, whenever I'm like, especially if I wake up and then there's like a big sale overnight, I'm like, oh my God, I made money in my sleep. So that's fun. Not that it's about the money, but it is fun knowing how hard I've worked, you know, in all of my businesses. Like, I've always done this super hard work for very little money. So that's a super fun thing. But also really, like, the main thing that is just so worth it is every single day. And I've already had it. It's like 9 a.m. and I've already had a couple of them this morning. Every day I get messages from people going, you've changed my life with the course that you've created. I've been thinking about doing this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and I haven't been able to do it. And now I found you and I'm doing it. Or, you know, I've wanted to put myself out there, but I've had so many fears, and I did your course and now I'm putting myself out there. Or, you know, I'm thinking back through all of my courses that I've created, because I've got a personal branding course and a publicity course and a mindset course, and like, just the results that people get from these training programs and the emails and the messages that they send me just make everything so worth it.
And that's so rewarding. I think that's even more rewarding than the money, is just seeing that the impact that you have. And I think that's something that you mentioned is why you even started this in the first place, is for that impact. So that's really fantastic. So looking at your e-learning businesses, when you started them, it was pretty much an unknown territory for you, and the industry in general was very new. So what did you envision it to be like? So what did you think it's going to be like in the future, and how similar is it to that today?
Honestly, I never had any grand plans of this turning into anything. So at the time, it was just, I remember my first year, I just wanted to make enough money to pay my bills. That was it. That I had no realization that this could be this global mega, we now, I have students in like countries all around the world. I'm making really good money. I'm not working too hard these days, which again is different from what I've always done. So, I'd love to say that I had this grand vision, but I simply didn't. And I guess I just didn't really realize how big it could become. And that's probably with all of my businesses as well. I never set out to build anything global. It just always ended up this way. But certainly now that I've been living it for a few years, I've certainly got some big grand plans for where I want to take it.
So do you think as an entrepreneur, it's okay to have expectations? So I expect it to be this big, or I expect it to get there, or do you think that just leads to disappointment?
I think you should have I think you should definitely have a goal and a vision of where you're headed. But then also setting expectations around you're not gonna beat yourself up about it if you don't get to that goal. So I always have, a monetary goal of what I want to achieve every year. Sometimes we meet it, sometimes we don't, but it's always making sure that I'm heading in the right direction so that I can hold myself accountable if, I get a little unsteady and get off path.
Yeah, and I think it's always important to be very flexible too. So that's great. So looking back, what do you wish you knew when you were starting off your journey as an entrepreneur?
Um, I guess I wish I knew that I guess it's just coming back to the failures, the failures were brutal. So I guess I wish that I knew that entrepreneurship is a personal development game. It is something that is going to be really tough. It is going to bring up all of your fears and all your limiting beliefs and all the things that, you need to work on. And if you can just accept that that's part of the journey, you'll have a lot easier ride.
That is so great. That is really valuable insight. So, Amber, we've learned so much from you. And as we wrap up, we're going to put you on the spot and we're going to play another mini game. So, this is a quick take. So, it'll be like a semi rapid fire. I am going to ask you some questions and I just want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Got
Okay.
it.
So, the first one is, what gets you out of bed every morning?
Oh, I think the impact, the thought that I'm going to change a few more people's lives each day.
Fantastic. What is your hustle anthem? So, a song that you just blast when you're hustling.
I love Everything by Queen Bee.
Awesome. So if you had to delete all but three apps on your phone, so you could only keep three, which three would you keep?
I would keep Evernote. It's my favorite app. I love it so much. WhatsApp, and I'd probably do Facebook because then I could run ads and then I'm back in the game.
So they're all productive apps that you're keeping.
Uh,
What is a quote that you live by?
Um, find someone who's done find someone who's done the things that you want to achieve and download all of their knowledge, wisdom, and insight into your business, saving yourself any of the blood, sweat, and tears.
I've never heard that one, so I really like that. If you could have the most expansive network in the world, so meaning access to anybody, or you could have unlimited funding, but you can only have one, so either the network or the funding, which one would you choose and why?
Network every time. Once you get yourself connected, you can always, money is something that's abundant. We can create money out of anything, but we can't create connections. Well, not without more, a hard work.
Yeah, it definitely helps to have a network. So if you did have any individual could invest in your company, so if you could have your dream investor, anyone that you want, who would you want to invest in your company?
I mean, I think Tim Ferriss, I'd love to have as an investor. And then I guess Brene Brown as well. I don't know if she invests, but I just adore that woman.
It's always good to have people that can provide insight as well, not just financial, but also just with their knowledge. So that's always a good choice. And last question, what advice would you give to your younger self?
It's all going to work out okay. You don't have to stress so much. Just believe in yourself. Stop beating yourself up. You're going to be okay.
Awesome. Amber, it was a pleasure talking to you today. We learned so much about the Love Academy, all your businesses, your journey as a serial entrepreneur. So this was very, very insightful. Thank you so much for being on as a guest.
Awesome. And if anyone's listening to this, make sure you come and find me on the gram and let me know that you found me here.
We are going to link all that information below. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. You can learn more about our guests through the details in this episode's description. For more content and the latest on all things BizBanter, follow us on Instagram at BizBanter or visit bizbanter.com. See you next time.